So, fellas, and my hard R fellas that have joined the channel, let's talk about white nationalism and if Nick Fuentes is really a white nationalist. There was recently some tension between Nick and a few fellow prominent voices with other dissident pro-white advocates, let's say. I don't think anyone will break this down the same way I will, so I feel a responsibility to do so. Now, I'm a dirty, rotten civic nationalist. Trash me all you want. I welcome it and I embrace it. But you should know that I use my platform to promote and normalize pro-white movements. I made a video on the Shameless Spurg 5 months ago called White Racial Consciousness is Good. I also made my first live stream about Arval and his project Return to the Land, chronicling the J-antagonization of whites setting up their own intentional white-only communities. I also seriously criticized the Jays more than my delicate little channel wants me to. So, I put my channel through a degree of risk to support the pro-whites and the JQs. The point of this video is to be objective, lighthearted, but also critical of the mild infighting that's happened in an effort to have a clear path forward, since I believe the answer to many of our problems in society requires several degrees of white nationalism. For my comment section, I have seen Devon Stack and Zoomer historians' names mentioned, so I know I have some crossover. But let's get started with what Nick Fuentes said that caused so much concern.
And by the way, I don't care what color you are. I know maybe that's going to be controversial on my side. But seriously, if you have citizenship, if you were born in this country, this is your birthright. This is our lives. This is our rights. This is our heritage. It's our tax dollars. It's our government. It's our military. This is our country. This is our empire. I'll unite with anybody who proclaims America first above all other countries, including and especially Israel.
Now, the criticism that will be levied at Nick Fuentes, and understandably so, is he said he knew it was going to be controversial, that he doesn't care what color you are. If you're born here, you're a citizen, and he made it sound like they have an equal stake in the country as white people do. That's how any reasonable person would interpret that. Now, he may be trying to cast a wider net since he's becoming more in the mainstream, but he didn't let anyone know he was going to say this, and so they were kind of asking questions, being like, can we get some clarification on that? Nick Fuentes didn't handle being challenged very well, let's say. So I'm going to show you his lengthy response in its entirety, and then show you Devon Stack's reaction, Zoomer Historian's reaction, and Arvoll's reaction, since their three names were mentioned, and apparently they are dead to Nick Fuentes.
So on my show last week, we're talking about Israel first versus America first. And I said that Josh Hammer, his wife is Israeli, his kids are Israeli. I said, they're not even from here. I said, if you're from here, if you're born here, I said, this is your birthright, this is America. And I saw all of my ankle biters in the pro-white movement took that clip and they said, is Nick Fuentes endorsing birthright citizenship? Do you think that is the point of that clip? We're talking about America first versus Israel first. We're talking about people that literally are foreigners. They're foreign nationals, bossing us around, intimidating us, controlling our system. In this context, I said, if you're born in America, if you're a citizen, this is your birthright. And people, their interpretation of that is, oh, so anchor babies own America? Really? That's what you got from that?
Nope, that was no one's criticism. It was specifically what you said about you don't care what color they are. Let me play it for you again. This criticism that he never addresses and he acts like it's something else the entire time.
And by the way, I don't care what color you are. I know maybe that's going to be controversial on my side. But seriously, if you have citizenship, if you were born in this country, this is your birthright. Me telling people Americans should take pride in being American, that's what you got out of that? And what was funny is the only people that heard it that way were like so-called white nationalists. Isn't that amazing? Because I haven't proven that I'm pro-white. Like, I do a show every night. I was at Charlottesville. I opposed Donald Trump in the election because he wasn't in favor of an immigration moratorium. I'm against Donald Trump because he's not deporting enough people. I say this every night. And they took this little loophole semantic thing and said, oh, so I guess he's in favor. And you know, this is why I have a real problem with a lot of white nationalists.
Nope, let's try it again. It was that you said, I don't care what color you are. And then you talked about if you're born here, it's your birthright. So even excluding immigration, we have an issue of heritage in the country that you are issuing a birthright to. Let's try it again, Nick.
And by the way, I don't care what color you are. I know maybe that's going to be controversial on my side. But seriously, if you have citizenship, if you were born in this country, this is your birthright. It's not because of what they believe. It's because of how they act, which is, shouldn't you be supporting me? Like, isn't this a time when our people should be circling the wagons around each other? Like, there's this all-out attack from the Republican Jewish Coalition, from Mark Levin, from...
Nick, these are not leftists that will support you no matter what, blindly. These are principled, dissident, white right-wingers. If you abandon the principle, they're going to be critical of you, and rightfully so, because there's a lot of infiltration that happens in pro-white movements, and people are skeptical of you, and rightfully so. You're in a very unique position. And I also understand how Nick Fuentes also probably doesn't trust each other. It's the Spider-Man meme where they're calling each other feds, all right? I get it, but this is a misstep. This is not instilling trust in the community, Nick. You're dodging the very obvious criticism and lashing out in defensiveness while requiring support. We'll cover this a little later on.
Like, we're in the battle over American sovereignty. Shouldn't you people who are supposed to be pro-white, like, I'm not pro-white enough suddenly? In what way? Because of a semantic way that you interpreted that? And by the way, I don't care what color you are. I know maybe that's going to be controversial on my side. But seriously, if you have citizenship, if you were born in this country, this is your birthright. And they use it as an opportunity to attack me, to one-up me, and score a point and say, oh, I'm going to take the piss. This little clip, yeah, I like Nick, but this was no good. Really? And so everybody that did that is dead to me. So I saw Devon Stack say that.
Devon Stack somehow has 28,000 followers on Odyssey, which is pretty massive for Odyssey. So he, along with many, I don't know, they say Wignet as like a pejorative, so I don't say that. Pro-white guy, white nationalist, I don't know what to call him. But the man has some influence and support. And now here is Devon Stack's response to Nick Fuentes saying he's dead to him.
And since I'm dead to him, let's have a little. You want to know what was said? I'll tell you what was said. Wasn't too crazy. You tell me if I was out of line here. So I tweet out, so now it's anchor baby nationalism. That's it. Not Nick's a traitor. Not I knew it. Nothing like that. Pretty benign. Definite pushback on a red line for me. He DMs me, like the next day. Do you really think this was a good faith interpretation of what I said? This is after it's been out on the internet and he hasn't responded to any, again, it's not just me. This is after it's been on the internet for over 24 hours. He hasn't, clarified his statement. And I replied, of course, or I wouldn't have said it. There aren't a whole lot of ways you can interpret someone saying they don't care about a person's race, but if they are a citizen, they have the same birthright as anyone else. And you preface the statement by acknowledging it would be controversial. So it's not like it was a throwaway line, and I'm hardly the only one that interpreted it that way. If you meant something different from what you said, I'm all ears. I've always tried to be fair to you in the past, but even many groypers interpreted it like I did and are busily telling me why it's a good thing in my replies, which is true. I'm not the lone psycho that twisted Nick's words. No, he said exactly what he said. And what I said he said is exactly what he said. And which is why a lot of confused groypers who had to suddenly shift their position on just turn on a fucking dime because, the dear leader had a major position shift and they had to go along with it, were defending exactly that position. Now, there were a few that were like, well, he didn't really mean it, but you could tell there was nervousness. A lot of them fucking thought that's what he meant and were trying to defend it from that point of view. I continued and said, and by the way, I'm not one of these jealous spurgs calling you a catboy, Sephardic beaner, or whatever, even if a chunk of my audience would like nothing more than for me to do exactly that. All things considered, you're white enough for me.
So this is like one of the reasons why I'm a civnat, not a white nationalist. These conversations of like being white enough I don't understand how this is decided amongst the white nationalist community, but even if Nick Fuentes was a black guy, he's not even looking to propagate his genes. He's not even really looking to procreate. So, I mean, why does it even matter how white he is when he's not even looking to make more white people himself? And he's questionably natalist in the first place.
Well, it kind of doesn't matter if you're multiplying out in the periphery. But people don't want to hear that because they want to feel like, they want what they want to be the thing that is honorable. And it's like, I don't think we really need to be giving any awards out because you married a woman and had kids. I mean, that used to be the expectation. Now people want a prize. That just used to be the biological reality. That was just like the sociological reality. You need to get married and have 10 kids because like 3 are going to die in the winter and you need 7 to like take care of you or whatever. It's like you just had 10 kids because there was also no birth control. Now people are like breaking an arm, they want to get a Purple Heart. They want to get the Medal of Honor, the Congressional Medal of Freedom, because they went out with some average woman and had a couple of kids, and they live in some house where they're watching Disney Plus, and you go to the farmer's market. It's a revolutionary act. I don't think so, Buster. Like, we need to go at the center, and that requires real dedication, real sacrifice that, yes, might involve actually not having kids for some people, Does it ever cross people's mind that in a war, young men die? Is this any different? Is sacrificing a family life different than dying in a war for a political outcome? I don't think so.
What, dude? Is never propagating your genes different from having your offspring die in a war for the country? Yeah, I'd say the difference is that they're polar opposites. You truly have a stake in the country when you create generations of your own bloodline and lineage. Don't you think you'd have a different perspective and passion in your advocacy when your own flesh and blood is going to have to carry the torch in the country? Wouldn't that give you a much deeper sense of nationalism and your own white genetic bloodline? Listen, fellas, I'm an atheist, liberal civic nationalist. I'm a genetic degen, but I can stand by what I say I am on 10 toes and nobody questions my authenticity. They just question why I would be those things. A white nationalist identity, similar to a communist identity, is a collective identity. Can you really be a hyper-individualist white nationalist? Sure, people pay you to spread the message, but that's what Hassan Piker does. Sure, Nick went through hell, but he only really has to worry about himself and his family that is independent of him. Gavin McInnes had to go through absolute hell when he got canceled, as he was raising children. His wife is Native American, so I don't know if his kids count as white enough, but he and everyone who has kids will tell you it changes everything. At that point, you truly have skin in the game. I'm not saying every white nationalist has to have kids. The supply of pro-white women does not meet the demand by a long shot of pro-white dudes that want to pump them full of white dick boogers. But Nick is breaking his arm, patting his own back for what he personally had to go through, while saying if you really want to help the cause for white nationalism, you might have to choose to not make more of your own white people. Just sounds like a dude who hasn't had kids. Wow. Been holding that one in for a while, apparently. Let's wrap this up with Devon Stack and see how Nick responded.
I'm not one of these people that wants to just watch you fail for the sake of watching you fail. If you didn't mean this, just say you didn't mean it. His response to my extremely fair concerns were, have a nice life.
Nick doesn't seem to be exactly the great unifier or very understanding when it comes to what many would think is an obvious criticism of him. So let's check in with Zoomer Historian.
Rather than see the bigger picture and give me the benefit of the fucking doubt, if ever there was a person or a time to do that, and circle the wagons and say, he's right, this is about America first. Nope. Zoomer Historian was another one. No, let's dunk. Let's dunk on him, because that's really helpful. That's productive.
So I can't find what Zoomer Historian initially said. I just have his response to what Nick just said. And he said, really insufficient reply. Everyone quite rightly had a problem with that clip because Nick said that no matter what color you are, failed to mention that repetitively in here along with the rest of the quote, then America is your birthright. Everyone is aware of pro-white things Nick has said, but when you see a clip like that, where it's explicitly said that any non-white born in the US has a birthright to the US, then people are obviously going to take exception. There is no way to interpret that positively. Would have been far easier to say he got carried away and didn't word that one perfectly, rather than bugging out and acting like the world is against him, and saying anyone who had a problem with that clip is dead to him. Even Eric Arval, who it seemed only DM'd him, just asked him what it was about. All I know about Zoomer Historian and Devon Stack is that I have comments saying I should watch their content, so I know I have crossed over with them. They seem like they're both being completely reasonable to the obvious criticism. When I first saw that clip, I was gonna bring it up on stream and go, haha, I'm a civic nationalist, and look at your boy. Like I was gonna do that. That's how obvious the criticism is. So seeing the reaction of Nick Fuentes caught some people off guard. Which finally brings us to Eric Arval, who I think is the most white nationalist person, because he's actually building an intentional white society in the country where they're having babies and having generations of children. It started quick. It recently started, but that's the plan, and that's what they're already engaging in, and they're rebuilding a white European culture. The man's living his values, but let's see the treatment he got.
Eric Arvoll is DMing me saying, "Are you against birthright citizenship?" in DMs. Really? How are you going to be pro-white? You're not even going to support me. How are you for all white people and, ecumenical pro-white politics? You're going to throw me under the bus?
So, as Zoomer Historian said, all Eric did was privately DM Nick, asking for clarification. He didn't say anything publicly, like a man, respectfully. He approached him privately to ask for clarification. So let's check in on Eric and his interpretation of what happened, with receipts.
So apparently I am now dead to Nick Fuentes. He says he will never help me again, and he says that no one else should help me either. This is because I privately DM'd him, asking for clarification on his stance on birthright citizenship. A clip was going around where he seemed to endorse birthright citizenship.
And by the way, I don't care what color you are. I know maybe that's going to be controversial on my side. But seriously, if you have citizenship, if you were born in this country, this is your birthright. This is our lives. This is our rights. This is our heritage. It's our tax dollars. It's our government. It's our military. This is our country. This is our empire.
Now, I knew that his stance in the past has been against that policy. I was actually in conversation with a much larger user on X in DMs, and he was attacking Nick. I was defending Nick, saying, I don't think Nick is changing his position. This is actually consistent with what he said in the past. But I wanted clarification from Nick before I defended him publicly. I told Nick in DMs that I wanted to defend him publicly as long as I knew that we were on good terms, and I got clarification on that point. It's not a ridiculous question. So I asked him that question, and he responded with this.
And so everybody that did that is dead to me.
This, I think, is because a lot of other people were attacking him publicly, and maybe it was uncharitable interpretation. I didn't attack him publicly. I asked privately, hey, what do you mean by this? I want to defend you, but, please clarify this first.
Now, I hope even the most fervent Nick Fuentes defenders can understand how, as a white nationalist, it would be counterintuitive and counterproductive when Eric messages him privately to get some clarification, and he swears him off publicly to kind of demonize even supporting his movement, which actually is bringing more pro-white people into the world.
Right now, I have built up, as far as I'm aware, the largest pro-white membership organization in the US. I've built a pro-white intentional community where there are multiple families. Kids are being raised right now in a pro-white environment. I have sacrificed my well-being and safety to do this. I'm taking a huge risk. If, we are ultimately sued or shut down, all of my resources have been invested in this. I am dedicated to the cause because I love my race and people, and I will do whatever it takes to benefit my race and people. And that has included supporting what Nick has done over the years. Even when he's said demeaning things about white people, and even when I've disagreed with many things he has said, still, I have supported him.
So I can't find a legitimate reason why Nick would publicize Eric's private, harmless, considerate request for a clarification on Nick's obviously civic nationalist rhetoric. If you're a leading white nationalist advocate, wouldn't you want to send positive attention and resources to the largest boots-on-the-ground intentional white community project in the country? From the cursory research I've done on Eric, I am unbelievably impressed, not just with what he's been able to accomplish, but his deep philosophical understanding of what he's doing and why. He's also an incredible strategist. Nick is talking about how you might have to sacrifice having a family to get the right people involved in positions of power. Eric met with Nick to actually develop a strategy to do so.
I visited him in Chicago, or about a year ago. I visited him to pitch this concept that in order to get our guys in elite positions, we need to give them the best possible groundwork. He was interested in working with me on some kind of school because at the time he felt that he was losing really high IQ people to, Zionists, the Bapsphere, stuff like that. And so, me as a traditional Platonist with a different kind of philosophical system that is coherent, he respected me as a philosopher. He wanted to work with me on a school. So my pitch, though, was that we need, a year set aside for recent high school graduates where they learn all the relevant facts in a detailed way, not just clips and memes in the way we receive it often in social media, but data-driven, intensive knowledge of crime statistics, racial differences, but also Western history, the classics, the best that we could get. And it would have the added advantage of allowing people to self-study in preparation for whatever they were going to go into in university. Seems to me still that this is the best way to assist any kind of elite-driven action. Our adversaries do things like that. They have their own schools, they have their own networks, they don't just enter into the institutions disorganized. That's my criticism. It was my criticism then, it's still my criticism now.
If you're a serious white nationalist leader, why would you not be allying with this man to, on the back end, work on the appropriate and necessary infrastructure to rebuild a positive white identity in the country as a white nationalist, is the question I would like answered if you disagree with me. Sure, Nick says he wants to infiltrate the institutions, but how does he plan to do that? What is Nick's community? A groyper follows Nick Fuentes before they do anything else. Even when he said something that was obviously civic nationalist, they immediately ran to defend him. So they're not white nationalist first, they're Nick Fuentes first. And then who does Nick Fuentes play well with and ally with and coalition build with in the white nationalist sphere? It's a collective identity. This is why I don't take part in this type of collective identity. I wouldn't be able to stand by it. It's pretty tough. You should be actively working for the interests of white people, especially when it's manifesting in reality, instead of creating a pithy spat.
It's not like this is just him doing his own thing. If he's recruiting our best and brightest and telling them go join the establishment, and then that results, because they're disorganized, in a large number of them either getting themselves blacklisted and doxxed because they didn't know how to approach it right, they weren't trained and coached on how to do it, or they get absorbed into the institution because they are tempted. That's the trope, right? You go in to Washington, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to make a difference, and then you become a swamp creature as you make compromise after compromise to achieve your political objectives. It's something that happens. You should not assume hubristically that because you are a bright young groyper that you're totally immune to that dynamic. It's unwise. This is the nature of the criticism. If it impacts my people, I will say something about it. That doesn't mean I don't have Nick's back or don't support him where he does a good job. I said very recently that we should all be glad he was on Tucker, regardless of how we personally feel about him or whether we agree or disagree with everything he said. On net, it is a good thing when he is out there pushing the message.
If anyone's gonna make me an Orthodox Christian, it's Andrew Wilson, and if anyone's gonna make me a white nationalist, it's gonna be Eric Arval. I also still support Nick Fuentes and think that he's a net positive. I think his strongest area is the JQ, and I think his weakest area is the WN, cause he's kinda acting like a YN. He's kind of about himself. He puts himself on an island. It's really hard to support a collective identity when you are prioritizing the self, which doesn't seem very Catholic. And so when he's defensive about obvious criticisms, something doesn't sit right with that. And he's in that positive, sure, because he's popular and that also enriches him. But how is he giving back to people that are trying to be on the same page as him and create this change that he wants to see in society? He just comes off as a pure rhetorician. Where's the local support for advocacy and making things actually happen? So let's start to end it here.
There is this disconnect in his behavior. On the one hand, he claims to care about the truth and philosophy and our race and collective well-being. On the other, he acts as though he prefers a multiracial society. He lives by choice in a multiracial city. Has he done anything to tangibly benefit a single white family? He's pushed our message, yes, but that has also helped him. That's not self-sacrificial. That is his platform that allowed him to rise to where he is.
So is Nick Fuentes a white nationalist? Pretty much in name only. I will always support his advocacy on the JQ. He is elite at that, because that's not a lifestyle. It's a pure war of rhetoric, antagonization, and most importantly, unavoidable facts. But a white nationalist? He placates to white incels and does not encourage them to produce white families. Eric, one of the men most responsible for attempting to achieve this seemingly impossible feat, Nick has publicly admonished because of his own ego. I'm just calling balls and strikes, fellas. I don't even think Nick is a narcissist. I just think he doesn't have much of a stake in the country as he thinks he does, because he doesn't have kids. Without kids, Nick will always have an increased inclination toward the self, as a biological fact. So, yeah, I would say go to Nick for your JQ, and go to Eric for your interest in how all white communities can be intentionally manifested. The talking will continue to make morale improve. Have a good one.